Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources that tackle this exact collapse. We're unpacking the writings and the platforms of Dr. Posey.
Yeah, this is a heavy one.
It really is. Specifically, we are pulling from his books, The 75% Man and the Living Solution. We're also cross-referencing this with his YouTube channel, which is just titled Dr. Posey, along with his biographical data and the mission statement of his organization, Negative to Positive Inc., or N2P.
And the material here is just, it's incredibly dense and highly tactical.
Definitely. The mission for today's deep dive is to explore Dr. Posey's whole blueprint for turning what he calls wounds into wisdom. He's basically building a framework where taking absolute, uncompromising personal accountability doesn't just, improve your mood.
Right, it goes way beyond that.
Exactly. It literally rewires your family dynamics and ultimately changes the history of your entire community.
But to really understand the intensity of this blueprint, you have to understand the architect. So, Dr. Posey, who actually goes by Khaki to his childhood friends, he is not just delivering abstract academic theories from some ivory tower.
No, not at all.
This is a fully battle-tested roadmap. We are talking about a retired Marine gunnery sergeant with 23 years of honorable service.
23 years? That is a lot of discipline.
Exactly. And he pairs that intense, decades-long military discipline with a doctorate in humanitarianism and a certification as a life coach.
Which is such a unique combination of skills.
It really is. But the most crucial credential he holds isn't a degree or a rank. Before he ever published the first of his 15-plus books on manhood and family dynamics, he spent 8 grueling years in personal therapy.
Wow, 8 years.
Yeah. He spent nearly a decade in deep, really uncomfortable self-reflection to figure out his own structural deficits. So he's teaching from lived, bleeding experience.
Okay, so let's get right into the core concept of his book, The 75% Man. Posey builds his entire philosophy on this pretty striking argument that many men today are being chosen by their partners when they're only operating at 75% of their potential.
Yeah, and he bluntly calls them overgrown boys.
Right, overgrown boys. But crucially, he doesn't frame this as an inherent evil or deliberate malice on their part. He argues they simply lack the proper modeling of what a man should actually be. They were just sent out into the adult world completely unarmed.
And if you look at the mechanism behind that missing 25%, Posey points directly to unaddressed childhood trauma and generational dysfunction.
Which makes sense.
He is actually highly critical of how haphazardly children are brought into the world. He writes about the devastating impact of unplanned children resulting from what he calls drunken mishaps or the fatal error of confusing sex with love.
Wow, he doesn't hold back.
Not at all. He says when a child arrives into chaos rather than deliberate purpose, they just don't get the purposeful modeling required to build a complete identity. And Posey asserts this terrifying but honestly clarifying truth here. He says, we cannot be broken if we are never whole.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because saying we cannot be broken if we are never whole, that completely reframes the entire self-help conversation.
It really does.
It's like trying to run modern relationship software on a childhood operating system that was never patched for bugs.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You crash every time you try to open a new emotional program. You don't have a broken conflict resolution program. You literally just never downloaded the code for it in the first place.
Exactly. And the danger of that unpatched operating system is that it's largely invisible until you put it under heavy load.
Like getting married or having kids.
Precisely. If your foundational code is missing the inputs for emotional vulnerability or financial responsibility or just basic emotional regulation, you will inevitably glitch when adult life demands those programs to run.
And then things fall apart.
Yeah. You are operating in a severe deficit from day one. And the longer you go without acknowledging the missing code, the more collateral damage you cause.
And Posey is highly active in trying to get men to recognize this missing code, right? His YouTube channel is essentially a digital classroom for this exact premise.
It totally is.
He has videos with titles like Men Are Not Broken, Gather the Missing Pieces. He is desperately trying to shift the societal narrative away from this idea of, oh, you are irreparably damaged goods, and toward a more mechanical, fixable reality. You're just missing some parts that you were supposed to be handed 20 years ago.
Right. And what makes this a crisis, rather than just a personal tragedy, is the societal mechanism surrounding it. We have entirely normalized the dynamic of coupling up with incomplete people.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
We normalize entering marriages and having children based on the hope of who someone could be. You look at a 75% person, and your ego tells you, oh, my love is strong enough to push them to 100%.
Which is such a trap.
Posey vehemently warns against this. He says when you do this, you aren't saving anyone. You are actually just purchasing a ticket for their pain train.
Their pain train. Man, and when you board that pain train, the suffering is totally mutual.
Oh, absolutely.
The partner who is stuck at 75% feels the crushing pressure of expectations they literally lack the tools to meet. They just feel like a constant disappointment.
Yeah, they're drowning.
Meanwhile, the partner who thought they could fix them suffers all the resentment of those unfulfilled expectations. The pain just compounds daily because neither individual did the brutal work of addressing their core trauma before trying to merge their lives.
It creates this awful feedback loop of misery. The incomplete person acts out of their trauma. The partner reacts to the symptom rather than the root cause, and the structural deficit of the relationship just keeps widening.
So if being stuck at 75%, running on buggy childhood software and dragging people onto your pain train, if that is the baseline for so many people, how does a person actually acquire those missing pieces?
Well, thankfully, Posey doesn't just leave us with a devastating diagnosis.
Right, he actually has a plan.
Yeah, he provides a highly specific, sequential, 4-step methodology to achieve wholeness. And the process is sequential for a reason. You cannot skip a step.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Step 1 is recognize where you came from. This requires a brutal, unflinching audit of your childhood. You have to strip away the protective nostalgia and look honestly at the trauma, the neglect, or even just the subtle lack of positive modeling you received.
Which naturally leads into step 2, which is acknowledge how you feel today.
Exactly.
Not how society tells you to feel, not how a quote-unquote tough guy should feel, but how that specific past neglect is dictating your knee-jerk reactions right now in the present.
Yeah, and taking that kind of emotional inventory is psychologically devastating, especially for men who have been conditioned to only ever exhibit anger or apathy.
Oh, for sure.
The cognitive dissonance in step 2 is exactly why people stall out. Admitting that a childhood event is controlling your adult behavior feels like a surrender of autonomy. But if you survive that realization, you reach step 3, which is do something about it.
So this is the tactical phase.
Right. It means hiring a therapist, joining a support group, and actively, consciously rejecting the coping mechanisms you've relied on for decades.
Then you arrive at the final phase, step 4, which is redefine your life. This is the moment of agency. Once you know what's broken and you have the tools to fix it, you have to actively decide what your new identity is going to be, completely independent of the pain you inherited.
And within this journey of redefining oneself, Posey outlines the anatomy of what he calls a real man. He distills this down to 3 major traits. The first 2 are accountability and responsibility.
Okay, so accountability and responsibility, those are the standard pillars of any self-improvement framework. But his third trait is where I really have to pause and push back heavily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The third trait he demands of a real man is limitations. Wait, what? Society tells men to constantly push past their limits.
Right.
To grind and hustle.
That's the usual message, yeah.
A Marine gunnery sergeant who spent 23 years pushing his physical and mental boundaries to the absolute brink is suddenly advocating for embracing limits. In a culture that screams no days off and limitless potential, telling a man to define his limitations feels like telling him to surrender. How is settling for a limit supposed to make you a stronger leader?
What's fascinating here is that it is the exact opposite of surrender. It is tactical resource management.
Okay, how so?
Think about it. When a Marine is in a combat zone, ignoring the limits of their supply lines, their ammunition, or their physical exhaustion gets people killed, Posey is applying that exact tactical reality to emotional intelligence.
Oh, I see.
For him, limitations represent profound self-awareness and restraint. It is the absolute rejection of the toxic, macho, egotistical persona, what he mockingly calls the grown-ass man, who pounds his chest but cannot even regulate his own nervous system. That fundamentally shifts the perspective. It's not about lacking ambition then. It's about knowing where your emotional guardrails are.
Exactly.
It's the strength to say, I am not equipped to handle this conversation right now without becoming destructive.
Precisely. Knowing your limitations means you possess the emotional intelligence to stop yourself from lashing out when you feel threatened. It also means you recognize when you're using destructive coping mechanisms to bypass your limits. Posey specifically zeroes in on the use of sex or alcohol as what he calls pillow counseling.
Pillow counseling. Man, that is a brutal, accurate term.
It forces you to look at the behavior objectively, right? Men often use intimacy or intoxication as a way to numb the anxiety of their missing 25%.
Yeah.
But you cannot sex or drink your way to emotional wholeness.
You really can't.
When you embrace your limitations, you stop using people and substances as emotional painkillers. You finally sit in the quiet and address the actual wound. And it requires a level of honesty that most people spend their entire lives running from.
So think about your own life for a second. In your workplace or, in your relationship, how often do you let your ego override your actual capacity?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Right. How often do you confidently say, "Oh, I got this," when you are silently drowning just because you think that's the performance expected of you? Posey is arguing that acknowledging your limitations is actually a superpower.
It really is.
It is the fail-safe that prevents you from burning down your life and the lives of the people who depend on you.
Because you cannot build the rest of your house until you accurately measure the massive hole in the floor. Admitting what you are currently incapable of doing is the foundational requirement for moving out of the 75% phase.
Let's follow this logic forward, though. So
Yeah.
a man does the grueling work. He audits his past, he acknowledges his limitations, drops the pillow counseling, and he patches his software. He hits 100%.
Okay, the ideal state.
Right. But he doesn't live in a vacuum. A healed man walking back into a highly dysfunctional family system is going to face immediate, severe friction. So how does this personal accountability scale up to save the family?
Yeah, that's the big question.
This is where Posey bridges from the 75% man into the broader thesis of his book, The Living Solution.
And in The Living Solution, Posey diagnoses the macro-level decay of our communities. He points out a glaring inefficiency in how society operates. Basically, we spend billions of dollars treating symptoms.
Always the symptoms.
We throw massive budgets at the criminal justice system. We create endless programs to combat high school dropout rates, bad credit, drug epidemics, and unemployment. But Posey argues these are merely the symptoms of a singular underlying disease,
Which is?
the deterioration of the family unit.
His core argument is incredibly straightforward. Strong families start with strong men. If you want to stop the societal bleeding, you have to cure the disease at the root. And that root is the household, led by a whole, healed individual who simply refuses to pass down their trauma.
And to explain the mechanism of treating the root cause rather than the symptom, Posey uses a deeply memorable story from his own life.
Yes, the 5-step problem-solving method.
Exactly. Identify the problem, figure out who or what caused it, fix it, state the lesson learned, and generate a new life rule. And he anchors all of this with the anecdote of an old man on a milk crate.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The details of this story are fantastic. So Posey is driving his car across country, all the way from Washington State to Indiana. Suddenly, the car starts stalling out.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Every 3 hours of driving, the engine just dies. So he pulls over in the heat, waits 10 minutes, starts it back up, and drives another 3 hours before it dies again.
That sounds miserable.
It is. He stops at 3 different professional mechanics along the route. These guys have the tools, they have the diagnostic machines, the expertise, and literally none of them can figure out what's wrong.
Wait, all 3 mechanics failed?
All 3. He finally limps the car into Indiana, completely at his wit's end, and pulls into a random gas station. There's no service center, no diagnostic computer, just an older man sitting quietly on a milk crate.
Okay, setting the scene.
Posey walks up, vents his entire frustrating saga to this stranger, and the old man just rubs his chin for about 10 seconds. He looks at Posey and says, "Take the car home, drop the gas tank, remove the flow from the tank, and clean the strainer."
Why?
Yeah. Posey goes home, follows the instructions, and the car runs perfectly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the metaphor here brilliantly illustrates his sociological thesis. The mechanics represent all the modern, expensive, complex societal programs.
Right. All the billions of dollars.
Exactly. They fail because they are looking at the superficial parts of the engine. They are using massive hammers to fix a hidden flow issue. The old man on the milk crate represents the critical necessity of seeking elder wisdom.
Wisdom that has already solved the problem.
Exactly, but is currently being ignored by society.
And the strainer. The strainer is the hidden root cause that is choking the entire system.
Precisely. In the context of society, Posey argues that the clogged strainer is a profound generational lack of deliberate love and intentional family education inside the home.
That makes perfect sense.
Our communities are stalling out every 3 hours because the foundational flow of wisdom from one generation to the next is entirely blocked by unresolved trauma.
We are pouring billions of dollars into mechanics, and we are completely ignoring the elders on the milk crates. We are ignoring the hard-earned wisdom that is just sitting there waiting to be asked.
It's tragic, really.
It is, which raises the ultimate question. Once you drop the tank and clean that strainer, how do you make sure it never gets clogged again? To protect future generations from suffering the same systemic failures, families need a new operating protocol. And this is where Posey introduces the concept of establishing formal life rules.
And Posey's writing takes on a tone of deep frustration when he discusses this. He is appalled by how frequently human beings repeat devastating, highly documented mistakes.
Like we never learn.
Right. He points to the crack epidemic as the ultimate example of unlearned lessons. We have decades of harrowing data. We have documentaries, ruined neighborhoods, and millions of shattered families. The catastrophic outcome is a known, absolute fact.
Undeniable.
Yet, he asks, why are young people still trying it today? Why are we repeating a lesson that our communities already paid for with their lives?
The cost of that lesson has already been paid in full, in blood and prison time by the generations before us. Why on earth are we buying it again?
Exactly. His solution is that we must actively institutionalize the lessons others have suffered for. You cannot just hope your kids make good choices. You must formalize these lessons into explicit life rules.
Right.
These are non-negotiable, heavily communicated boundaries designed to protect your family's peace and future trajectory.
And he provides incredibly practical examples of these life rules. One that stands out immediately is his rule to never lend money to broken people.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
At first glance, it sounds kind of harsh, but the mechanism behind it makes perfect sense. He explains that lending money to someone who lacks the structural wholeness to manage their own life just creates bad blood.
Because they can't pay it back.
Right. If you want to help and you have the surplus, just give them the money as a gift. But creating a loan sets up an expectation that a broken person simply cannot meet. When they inevitably default, the resentment ruins the relationship entirely.
Another foundational life rule he demands is establishing yourself as a battery rather than a sucker.
A battery versus a sucker. I love that terminology.
It's great. A battery is an individual who stores energy and provides solutions. When chaos erupts in the family, the battery is the person everyone turns to for stability and a map out of the crisis.
Because they have their own house in order.
Exactly. Because they have done the work to become 100% whole, they have the surplus energy to power others.
Conversely, a sucker is the person who constantly absorbs everyone else's manufactured chaos, but never implements a boundary to stop it. They just get drained until they have nothing left to give.
And you cannot be a battery if you are operating at 75%. You barely have enough juice to run your own life, let alone stabilize a family in crisis.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the architecture of these life rules, they function like financial stop-loss orders for your emotional bank account.
Oh, like a brilliant way to put it.
Thanks. They're like guardrails on a treacherous mountain road. They don't drive the car for you. You still have to put in the grueling daily work of being a good parent and partner. But they automatically trigger a hard boundary before you can bankrupt your family's peace on the exact same bad investments that destroyed your ancestors.
And the most compelling aspect of Posey's work is that he isn't just publishing these rules and hoping the market figures it out.
Right, he's actually doing the work.
He is operationalizing this philosophy on the ground through negative to positive ink. The data coming out of N2P shows that he is actively turning theory into tangible community transformation.
This isn't just a deep dive talking point. The impact on the ground is totally measurable.
Very much so. Yeah. N2P has mentored over 100 men through their change agent workshops. And these workshops are uniquely structured. They are 100% veteran-led.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this injects that rigorous military accountability directly into the emotional healing process. Posey is taking these incomplete men and teaching them how to become what he calls the alpha and omega of their seeds.
Let's break down that phrasing because it is so powerful. The omega represents becoming the absolute final firewall. You are the definitive end of the generational trauma. The buck stops with you and the pain does not pass to your kids.
Yes.
And the alpha means you become ground zero for a totally new legacy of deliberate intentional modeling.
He is systematically building an army of batteries. He is equipping men with tactical emotional tools and a veteran-led community of support, proving that the cycle of dysfunction can be broken. It is a literal roadmap from the chaos of where you are to the structural wholeness of who you were meant to be.
The scale of this work is phenomenal. Let's pull all of these threads together, though. Think about the terrain we just covered on this deep dive.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We started by examining the unhealed, 75% overgrown boy, the man sent into the world completely unarmed, running on buggy, unpatched childhood software.
And boarding the pain train.
Yes, boarding the pain train. Then we explored the devastating cognitive dissonance of acknowledging that past pain and discovered how embracing your limitations and rejecting temporary numbing actually builds a 100% real man.
The true battery.
Exactly. And finally, we zoomed out to see how that individual wholeness scales up. By dropping the tank, cleaning the hidden strainer of our family dynamics, and installing concrete life rules, we actually stop the generational bleeding.
And the profound takeaway here is that this blueprint is not exclusively for men, nor is it exclusively for veterans. The mechanics of trauma and healing apply to absolutely anyone who is allowing the fog of past dysfunction to parent their future.
So true.
The lack of deliberate modeling, the boarding of the pain train, these are universal human issues. As Posey states with perfect clarity, better parents make better children, they make better parents. It is a multi-generational cycle of wholeness, but it requires an individual to intentionally start it.
You have to make the conscious, uncomfortable choice to be the omega. So I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over today as you look at the structure of your own life.
Yeah, think about this.
Dr. Posey reminds us that there is no patent on life lessons. The people who walk this earth before us have already paid the ultimate agonizing price to figure out what destroys a family and what builds one.
They paid the bill.
Right. So look at your relationships, your finances, your emotional habits right now. If you are the culmination of your ancestors' history, what is the one incredibly expensive life lesson they already paid for in full that you are stubbornly insisting on buying again?
Are you going to read the bloody receipt they left behind, or are you going to keep paying the toll on a road that leads nowhere?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.